Macric. Okay, starts off with d4 again. I'm going to try knight f6 again. Well, he plays a normal opening. Okay. Go for a Nimzo Indian or, let's see. Well, I can do the Queen's Indian or this Benoni line here. Or the Blumenfeld Gambit, right? I don't know how to play that. Let's just take. Okay, so he wants to give me a tempo. I really expected him to take with the knight. So I've traded my c-pawn for his d-pawn, which should be a little bit of something for me. But I have this backwards d-pawn myself to deal with. I have to figure out where to put this bishop. And I can't easily play d5. Bishop could come out here with check. How's he going to block? The knight or the bishop? Let's go ahead and give that check and see how he responds. He blocks with the bishop. Okay. So that's all right then. I could trade the dark squared bishops, and that would maybe make this dark squared weakness here not so important. And then I could play with b6 and bishop b7. So I'll get the bishop to b7 right after he gets his bishop to g2. So everything should be okay along this diagonal. And now let's see, I could play with the rook to c8, or I could castle. I think I should castle unless there is a reason why I need to play rook c8, but I don't see that as necessary at this point. He can play queen to... he could have played queen to d6, and that might have been a little bit awkward. I might have played something like queen to e7 or rook c8 and queen c7. And he could have defended it with the knight. So yeah, he should have considered that. He should have. Okay, let's put a rook on the c file. He should maybe consider it here again. But it seems like he's not the considering type. So I'm just going to continue to ignore that hole on d6 as long as he's doing it. I could play knight to a5 here. It's looking at the b3 square, and it's looking at the pawn on c4. And that looks like a nice little double attack. I don't know how he defends it. I mean, if he plays b3, I can just take on b3, so that's not helping. Well, he could defend the c-pawn with his queen, and that gets it away from the fork. But no, then the rook and the knight are still combining on c5. So I guess he just loses a pawn here. And the knight on c5 covers that hole on d6, and eventually I'll be able to get in the move d5, and that will be all good for me. So now he's starting to think. So yeah, before this move, does it still have the times? Oh, I'm not proposing a take back. I'm trying to look at the times here. No, it doesn't keep the times. I get confused by different interfaces. There's other, but I think he was. I think he had spent no time at all up to this point. Well, if he decides to sit this game out and let his clock expire, this could be a dull game. Ah, now that's a nice move. It's a counterattack. He's hitting my a-pawn, and he's looking at the weakness. The weakness on d6 he spotted. So, but I'm going to go ahead and take the c pawn because that hits his queen. So it's the bigger threat. And then I'm going to play a6 and hit his knight while my knight is covering the d6 square. He could still go to d6, and then I would trade. Well, assuming his queen stays in contact with d6. So he has to move his queen here, I assume. And then I play a6, and then, yeah, so his queen is staying in contact with d6, hitting my knight. So if I play a6 here, I'm guessing he'll go knight d6, knight takes, and then queen d6. But I've got an extra pawn there, and I can play queen to c7 to chase his queen away. So I think that must be good. And my knight is still defended by the rook. And where else can his knight go? His knight could go in the corner, but yeah, I expected it to go there. Hitting my bishop, and then we go here. And well, he could defend the queen with the rook. But I could play a knight move to chase the queen away. Say knight to knight e4, followed by pawn to d5. If he plays rook to d1. So rook d1, knight e4, queen moves, and then I can play pawn to d5. Yeah, so that's that arrow is kind of misleading because I wanted to use that to walk backwards in the game. It doesn't let me. So these are just things I can do: resign, offer a draw, or propose a take back. Okay, so yeah, I just moved the queen. So I want to play d5. It may look weird to block in this bishop, but gets rid of this hole here. I think that's more important, and I'll find some way to make that bishop useful, I'm sure. And I might go with rook to c8, rook c1, yeah. So I'm just going to step aside with the queen. Where to, though? Where's a good square for the queen? I don't necessarily want to put it here, so I'm going to go over to e7. I didn't want to be in line with his queen. There might be a later pin along the d file. After my knight moves. My knight at the moment would be defending. It would be defending. Okay, I can kick the knight back because my knight is still defending h7. So there's no mate threat. Yeah, so he goes there. So I can play knight e4 now. But he can take with the bishop and double my pawns. That might actually cost me some advantage. Let's centralize the other rook here. And okay, so he's going for some knight maneuver. Where can the knight go from here? It can go to that square, I take it, that square, I take it, that square, I take it, that square, I take it. Or it can go back. There and there are occupied, that's occupied, so back to h3. If I were to play pawn to d or e5. Now, could he try an intermediate move like bishop h3 instead of going knight h3? Then I take the knight, he takes the rook, I take the rook, he takes the rook, I take with the bishop. Yeah, so that's two pieces for a rook. And I have to be aware that this rook is already on that rook and the bishop, so he'd have two attackers there, but I have this rook and this bishop defending it. So I'd lose the exchange there, but I'd pick up a knight, so that's good for me. So if I play here and he takes on d5, hitting the queen, then I play knight takes. He might throw in rook takes rook then. Rook takes, bishop takes, queen takes. So is there a way out of that? Pawn here, knight takes. If I trade rooks first, he takes the queen with check. So I have to take the knight first. That gives him a chance. Here's the way to do it. I trade rooks first. And then I play d5, and the knight can't take here. Knight takes, bishop takes, queen takes, rook takes, and my king is not getting mated. So, because this, or is it getting mated? No, because my rook can come back. Well, hang on. Let's do that a little more slowly. Pawn here, knight takes, bishop takes, queen takes. Oh yeah, I've gotten rid of the queen, so there's no mate. Okay. So, and there's nowhere else for the knight to go. So let's play that. Taking squares away from the knight. So the knight goes back to h3 and has nowhere to go. Then what's my follow-up? I could follow up with d4 and trade bishops. Get my queen over here on a good diagonal. And try and get my knight and queen coordinating against his king. That would be the plan at this point. Okay, so he's looking to see what he can do here. I don't see any move other than knight h3, so it's a little mysterious why he's taking so much time. Of course, he's probably not happy with the knight h3. Yeah. So I'm getting low on time. I'm going to start moving a little more quickly here. So I think just d4. Getting rid of that bishop will allow me to activate this knight. And also that's one of his better pieces. He's got a really bad knight. And I should have a good knight and an extra pawn after this trade. And I am holding on to the pawns over here. His queen is looking at a6. His rook has the c-file. I could contest the c-file next. Or I was thinking of something like knight to knight to e4. But what does that really do? It's also knight d5 and queen. Now, if I move the queen out, he can just grab the pawn over here. Okay, so he wants to take advantage of the pin on my rook. Makes sense. Okay, so first let's prepare the move queen to b3 and also, queen to b6. And also defend this pawn over here. Aha. So he's undermining that way. So let's take here. It's interesting. My queen could actually hop into f3. Threaten to take this pawn, but he takes here, hitting my knight. So let's take first and see how he wants to go. Does he want to leave me with this isolated pawn? Is that his plan? Or if he takes with the other pawn, then I can play queen f3, hitting his knight, hitting this pawn. This isolated pawn is also going to be a passed pawn, so it's not all one-sided there. he could also take with the knight. But I could still play queen f3 after that. So Macrick, once he slowed down and started thinking, he actually played a pretty good game, I think. You know, he was just down a pawn from blitzing out his first few moves, which in an 8-minute game like this, there's really no need to move so quickly in the beginning. But people do it out of habit. It's yeah, that's not a bad move. So queen here. If he attacks it with the rook, I can take the pawn. Takes the pawn, I take the queen and then take the pawn back. The knight defends the queen, so that's a nice point there. He could play. Okay, he didn't. So let's take the queens off. Well, that's mainly so I get this pawn back, and yeah, he's going to try and recover a pawn here. So let's see if I push the pawns forward, and I could come here hitting my my rook. So let's go here instead. He's got a check, driving my king back. But once he does that, I also have check here and check and take pawn. So that's probably the way to play this. Start taking off pawns. Yeah, now I need to get to the h-pawn there. How do I do that? Knight here would be nice, but his king, maybe like this. Okay, so I'm going to hit his knight here. And I'm going to play here. This threatens mate, right? If he takes my pawn, rook takes h2 is mate. The king can't come forward, can't take the knight, can't escape. Oh, he can take the knight. Silly me. Silly me. Yeah. Well, I get a pawn. So I stay a pawn up, but that's not what I intended. This might turn into a draw. He attacks my pawn, I attack his pawn, and then it'll just be 2-on-1 over here. Which is a book draw. But it is something you can play on. It's maybe not so easy to draw. So I will play on, see if I can make some progress here. And I think I can stay ahead on the clock now. So the idea would be rook here to drive his king back. Okay, let's see. I might offer a draw after a couple of moves here, but I might try one or two things. I can kind of force this pawn to come forward. I mean, I can force my pawns forward. That's what I want to do. Get my pawns forward. Oh, and if he falls for a trick like this, of course, that's always something. That's always something you can hope for. He resigned. Okay, well, I will upload this and do a post-mortem. See you guys later. Bye.